Okay, let's continue. So what we're going to do now is to start creating controllers. We have one hierarchy with geometry, we have one hierarchy with all our joints, and really nice and simple. So what we're going to do now is we're going to build one controller that we're just going to duplicate all over the rig. It's definitely the fastest to do it this way, by just building one, but as soon as we start going into the sides, we're just gonna quickly make a copy of our controller that we are coloring, so we don't need to color everything manually afterwards. So what I'll do here is I'll just I like to use just the circles because they're quite easy to use here. So the circle is just created here. I'm gonna keep it fairly big, something like that, and then I'm gonna freeze that. So freeze. Cool. And then I'm gonna just group it, and you can see I have history on my objects. So I'm just gonna delete history, so I think that's Control Shift D. And I have a group on top of it, so when I move this around, the controller is still zeroed out because the group is taking all the translates and rotate positioning of that. So we know that if I right click on this and I say show shapes, you can see that there's actually two groups and a shape, because every shape is connected to a group. So like that. So if I take off that shape, you can see that this is actually what the animator, if I select something, this is what the animators will be animating. And the reason why it's 0 is basically because this object is, the object above it is determining where this object's 0 position is. So if I take this one over here, you see that the orient group, which is what we call it, has all the rotations. So if I reset this one now, it's going to jump back to its parent's position. Yeah, so if I take this one now and I reset that back into 0, it's going to go here. We also know that we can manipulate a shape by going into the component mode here. So I can say control vertex, and then I can move this around. I'm going to do something like that just to quickly prove a point hit if I took it out of that. And you can see that the controller is still 0, but the shape is now different, right? Same thing if I did like this. That doesn't really change anything on the actual movement, because what I'm moving around is the group, or the shapes group here, right? And I've only changed the shape, so the shape actually doesn't move anywhere inside of Maya. It's the position here that's moving, and the points here on the shape is a different thing, right? That's what determines the look of that shape. Cool. So I'm just gonna keep it like this. So what we'll do now is I'll just take that shape here, and I'm just gonna manipulate that into a 0 position here, world. And I'm gonna start out by just coloring this one, drawing override. So I'm gonna go into the circle here. So if I select that circle, just drag over here without anything else, drag over here and go into the shape, and you can see that it's a NURBS curve. Then you go underneath the object display, drawing overrides, enable that, set this to a color, and I'm gonna start, I always use yellow for the middle. And I'm just going to take this thing here, and I'm going to take the shape. So I'm just going to say right click and show shapes. I don't want to see shapes anymore. I just want to see the objects. So I'm going to take this, I'm just going to make this a lot. Actually, I'm going to duplicate it first, isolate it, and then just, if I have that isolated, I can just make that bigger. Cool. So that is going to be our global controller. And as always, when our animators are referencing in a character, they always need like a controller where they can sort of like position the character, and then they usually have another one where they can sort of like move that around. So I'm just going to take this one, I'm going to duplicate that, drop that underneath here. So now I have like a control hierarchy. First the global controller, then the main controller. So if I select that main controller last, isolate that, make that a little bit smaller, you can see that I have 2 now. Okay, here we go. So let's rename these. First we're going to call this main CTRL and global. Great. And I'm going to call this one for an orient group. So we kind of know that that's the main controller's orient group. Same thing for this one. Great. Okay, so I have this. I'm just going to take this here, and I'm going to move it out to the side with the orient group. So the controller is actually still 0. Then what I'll do is I'll just take this main controller and I'll just start moving this around. So I think I don't really need to see my geometry right now. So I'm just going to say show geometry and take that off. So let's find polygons. There we go. So I'm just going to drop that up there. And the next thing here, I'm just going to move that one up there. And we're just going to use these two. I don't think we're going to use that extra joint there. We can probably just delete that later on. So actually I do want to see polygons because I just need to measure these controllers. But what I can do is I'm just going to hide it instead for sometimes. And I'm just going to isolate that. So I'm just sitting here and I'm just kind of like figuring out like the way I want to do it. So in order to select that, I'm just going to go there and I'm going to fit it. And keep in mind that all these middle controllers specifically are always nice for animators if they can see them from all around the character, because you don't know what angle they're animating from. So if you can make like the big controllers available from every angle, you know, you sometimes see somebody making a controller and then it's for the clavicles, for instance, and then they make them sit in front, which is it's not great, because if I put my controller like here and I say like, okay, that's how he should move the arm around. What if the animator is animating from back here because the character is walking and he wants to, he can select that controller, and that's never great. So make sure that your controllers are available in as many positions as possible, you know. Great. Next thing, I'm just gonna select this one here and I'm gonna rename these. So this was I'm gonna call this spine. Cool. And this is, I can steal that name from this one, call that B, and I can take this name here and call that B. And as I said, I don't think I need this one here, so I might just, hopefully this is not too confusing, but basically I have like this spine AJA, but I'm not using it, so I'm just gonna rename this down here to be named the same as this one. And then I'm going to take everything that's underneath this one, which is up here, right? I'm going to drop that B joint underneath this one. So this joint here is no longer being used. So I'm just going to move that. And then we're just going to go from there instead. So this will be, this controller AJA is controlling the joint AJA. This controller B is controlling joint B. Just so you guys know that that adds up. Then we're gonna try and continue, and now because our spine is pointing directly up in the air here, I'm gonna do the same thing for the neck. So I'm just gonna take this one here. I'm gonna put that here. Cool. And I'm just gonna make that smaller. And you'll notice one thing that I'm doing here is that I'm actually relying on the, even though I rotated and all this stuff, like in a previous rig, I don't really too much care. Like what I could have done is I could have set this rotation axis to be the same as the world, you know, so Y was pointing upwards, X was pointing to the side, because right now my controller is actually not pointing the same as my joint, but that doesn't really matter. What I really care about is just that all these controllers, when I bend them, are bending the same direction. You know, that's important. So when my animator is trying to make like a walk cycle and he needs to rotate these spines and necks back and forward, it needs to be the same. So as you can see, like I can have a controller that's not necessarily following the direction of my joint. It's not a biggie in the rig like this for previous, but for a for when you're doing the final rig, I would definitely try and correct these sort of things. So we could go back and try and just reorient these, but since it's not really a big thing, I'm just gonna leave it for now. Just be aware that I'm not following the actual direction of the bones here. And I'm showing you like, you know, like a lot of cheating ways. Basically because when I would go back and build my actual rig, I would rebuild these controllers and then I would place them correctly. And then I would orient the joints correctly. What's most important is that the joints are positioned correctly, that they have, you know, like the right position compared to where they're deforming. Cool. So the next thing here is yeah, I mean the reason why I'm not doing, and I just want to elaborate on that a little bit. The reason why I'm not doing it right now is because it's a previous rig. If it was a final rig, I would certainly follow these. And I would probably reorient this. And the way that I would do it, just so you guys know that for the time being, or if you want to do it right now, just to even go further, you can go in here and say orient joint. And if I wanted to orient them so they would actually follow the position of the world controllers, because it's easier when we're building them that we're following the world, then I would say like Y was pointing upwards, Z was forward. So if I take that here and I say Y should go upwards, so Y is the main axis, Z should go forward, so I would say Z, and which, Z is secondary axis, and which direction of the world position should the Z direction go. So I'd say like Z should go forward, because that's what it does in the world position. We can see that down here. So if I go like that, you can see it actually places itself compared to the world position. And now what I could do is, because we can take this this group here of the neck, which I need to rename here, so I can call that neck. Sweet. Then I could take this neck here and I can just parent it underneath this one, and I can just say minus that out. And if I isolate that, I can go and correct that shape a little bit. So I'm just going to rotate that down. And you can see if I now take this group and I unparent that, you can see that the group is actually inheriting all these rotates and translates, but it's also pointing and rotating in the direction. And then I can take this one, I can drop that underneath that spine B now. And I can take spine B and drop that underneath spine A. So keep in mind that you have a spine, and then you have a controller, then you have a group, then you have a controller and a group, a controller and a group, and so on. So every group is holding the rotates and translates, rotates and translates. So the controller, if you select the controller here, is zeroed out. But now the cool thing is also that if I take these things here now and I rotate it, it's rotating correctly, If I rotate in one axis, they're all rotating the same. And that's really easy for the animators to work with. So if you don't really want to sit and just orient your controller, you can just set them all to be oriented in the world position. That just means that you're not following the direction here. So direction of the joint. So if I take this spine, because I just rotated this thing here, I can take this here and I can just duplicate it, and I'm just going to zero that out, and you can see how that actually moved, and then or rotated it. And I'm going to place this at the head here, and I'm going to isolate, and I'm just going to do change of shape. And I'm just going to do something like that, so that's nice. Cool. So we have that, and I'm just going to keep that in the same position, so same thing as before. I'm just going to rename that, but before I rename it, I'm just going to duplicate it, move it up to the jaw here, and I'm going to select that. You can see I'm going to select all the points here on the jaw, which is going to be the jaw, and just rotate that and move it down here. There we go. And a good trick that you can see, like, it's really a little bit annoying for me because I would actually benefit a lot if I can just rotate it from, you can see like when I hit rotate, it's rotating locally, and I can just hold down, hold down E and then left mouse click and then go down to rotate object center. The center would be like where the pivot point is, and now I can actually rotate it from there and do like that. So that's a lot easier. Same thing with the scale. Scale from object center. I can do something like that. And slowly we're starting to see a jaw emerging here. Something like that. There we go. Cool, and now we have a jaw. So great. So that's the middle controllers that we just fixed there, and then we just need to rename all these things. Jaw and jaw. Oh, okay, now I'm messing this up. This is not a jaw, this is a head. And this is a head. Cool. Great. So that's where I would like you guys to be, and now I'm just gonna do the I can see that I took out the head joint here for some reason. I'm just gonna drop that back underneath the neck. There we go. And let's see what group. Oh, that's the empty group, and then we have our controllers here. So we have all the controller in the middle. Cool. And then the next thing we're gonna do is just create controllers for the fingers and the arms. So what I want you guys to remember is that we're creating FKs for the clavicles, and we're creating FKs for the fingers, but we're not creating FKs for the arms here, only for the hand, because the arms and legs are gonna be IKs. So I'm gonna hit save here. And what I'll do now is, let's see, what should we do? I think I'm gonna start out with the left side, and then we're just gonna move our way to the right side. And yeah, as I say, like I would always recommend somebody to go into scripting how to do these things, but because you guys, that's not a mandatory thing for this, so we're just gonna keep it simple. So I have this controller down here that I'm gonna duplicate that orient group, and I'm gonna parent that underneath the arm here. Oh, sorry, underneath the clavicle here. And you know, like if I parent underneath it, I can inherit that position by zeroing out that group here, right? And then I can unparent that group again, and you'll see like now it has the same position as that as this clavicle. So I'm just gonna try and select these points here and just make that a little bit bigger. And with this, I think, you know, the best thing we can do right now is just kind of do it for both sides at the same time. So inherit the position of the other side, unparent that, and isolate the both of them. Take the points, make them bigger. As I said, I try to always make them visible from both front and back. And I'm not really trying to do anything clever here. I'm just trying to, you know, find a decent looking shoulder controller look that's available from both sides. So I think something like this would be good. And you know, like if you can't figure out like how to manipulate the controllers around so you can do them both at the same time, remember that the controllers are, the way that the controller look is not the way that the controller moves. So it doesn't actually really matter. Like if one controller on this side is looking a little bit like that, or if it's moved just like this, you know, that's okay. It's just the shape. What's important is that the rotation and translates are zeroed out, because that's what really matters, right? Everything else is just a shape. And that's why scripting comes in handy, because it's not always easy to mirror shapes. So, but in this case, we're fine. So obviously I want to color these things. So my animator knows I always go blue for the left side and red for right. I think I've been teaching that to you guys for quite a lot of times. Let's go for something a little bit more powerful. There we go, better. Cool. Okay, so that's basically the color that we want. And I might some of you will know me. I'm really lazy when it comes to naming stuff. it's so nice being lazy, and then at the same time, you know, you're so lazy that you try and optimize the process, and that's when you learn scripting. So what I'll do here is I'm just gonna call that L. Cool, steal that name. And I was about to say, I'm also so lazy that I always try and duplicate things around, because there's really no need to rebuild stuff that you can totally get around with building once. So I'm always looking out for places where I can, you know, fake some kind of movement. Okay. What is this here? Okay, that's the group. Okay, great. So I'm just gonna take this group here, which is our controller, and I'm gonna duplicate it once. I'm gonna move it over here. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Building stuff manually. Okay, yeah. Okay, so L thumb. Cool. And now again, like I have this here, and I want to I wanted to inherit this position here. Zero that out, and I'm gonna duplicate it. Parent to duplicate it underneath here. Zero that out. Duplicate it. Select the joint. Parent it underneath that. Zero that out. And you can see that I just messed up a little bit, because I should probably have colored these before I did that. So we'll do that on the next round. And I'll do that trick again, just so you guys can get the hang of that if you didn't quite catch it. Now I have these three groups. I'm just going to take these three groups and unparent them. So remember that it's the group that you're unparenting, not the controller. The controller should always be 0. Yeah? Great. Thumb, AJA, B, C. Did I just mess that up? I did. C, and this is the B. There we go. So B, A, B, C. Cool. And I'm just gonna drop the B underneath there. We're gonna do it the opposite way, like that. So now A, B, C. Cool. And I can bend those. Sweet. And then I'll take the whole hierarchy of these, and I'm just gonna color them quickly. So blue and blue and blue. Cool. Right, so I have 3 controllers here. I'm just going to duplicate the whole hierarchy. So when I duplicated it, I parent it underneath the joint here, and I zero out that, and you can see that that's positioning the first one. Then I find the second B here, and I'll drop that underneath the B bone here, zero that out, and take the last one here. So I take the orient group, parent it underneath this one, say zero that out, and that will position them correctly. Then I take the well, right now it's called thumb, but I take that and I just drop that underneath joint B here and joint A, and then I take these out of the hierarchy again, and then I rename them. Modify, search, replace name. We're looking for thumb. We want to replace with index. Great. And I think because you guys know how to place this, I'm just going to delete this. I'm going to make my index finger control all these fingers. And I can be that crude because for me, like, this character is not really moving his fingers or anything. To be fair, the character is not doing anything, but because it's an example. But if the character is not moving his fingers, I'm not gonna make the fingers. Okay, so because I have these here, I can now duplicate these and just move them over here. And I'll just do the same thing again. So thumb A underneath this one. Inherit the position, And as you can see, like it works also for inheriting the position of the rotation, right? So I'll just keep on moving those orient groups here, and I just put the orient group underneath the joint where I want it to be, and then I zero out the orient group. So I put this joint, this group underneath whatever joint I want to control, and then I zero out that, so it basically inherits the position of this one, and then I just take it out again of that hierarchy. So I only move it in just to zero it out, and then I take it out again. I take this group into this position just to get that position, and then I just take it out again. It's just a quick way to get the position of this joint, and then I can take them out again. So I take orient C underneath controller B, orient B underneath controller A, and here we can just do the L, R, unparent that. Great. Do the same thing for this guy. Parent 0. Parent 0. Parent and 0. And take that and rename them. Cool. And we just delete that and those fingers there. Great. And of course we need to recolor these really quick. Keep in mind that I'm coloring the NURBS curve, not the actual transform. You do not want to color this one in here. You want to color this one. And if it doesn't say this, and you've already done this, drawing overrides, if you've done this on this group, everything underneath that group that hasn't been forced to color will be colored the same color. So everything in the hierarchy downwards will inherit that if you put it on the transform node, but not if you put it on the NURBS curve node. Oops. There we go. Cool. And lastly, we just want to create some hand controllers and some leg controllers. So we're almost there with the controller. Next video we're gonna do the mechanics, which shouldn't take very long, and then in the last video we're gonna do the skinning. Cool. Let's leave that there for now. It's a bit of a mess, but that's okay. I'm gonna hit save. Just gonna take this here, and I'm gonna use this for a hand, so I'm gonna duplicate that, put it on this one here, and you will see that I'm not actually rotating or translating. I want the world position for IK. That's important. So I'm gonna say L hand orient group. Cool. And same thing here. So this is important. I'm not actually dropping the group underneath the arm here, because I want to use the world space position. And because I mirrored this joint, I used the skeleton mirror. You can see if I take this underneath here and I hit P, it will ask me to rotate it 180 degrees. And if I do that, you will see that the object is actually no longer in the same rotation order as the world space. So that's a little bit different because we're going to use these for IK. So I'm just going to take that out of the hierarchy, not zero those out, and just call this R hand instead. Cool. Color that red. Let's give that a red. Great. And let's give that a blue. Cool. And I'm just gonna rotate these, so you can see, yeah, so if you can't rotate them locally like this, it's probably because if you hold down E again, you're not setting it to rotate object center, because if you don't have this one ticked on, you can see I can only rotate like that. And so I'm just gonna set this to rotate to object center, so that's each individual object center, and I'm gonna hold down J while I'm rotating. And if I do that, it's gonna add like 15 degrees rotation snapping. Great. And then I'm gonna duplicate both of them and just place them one by one down by the feet here. Again, select both of them. Great. And that's probably how we're gonna do that. So with that, I'm gonna take these, I'm gonna rename that. Instead of calling it hand, we're gonna call it leg. Cool. Okay guys, so I think if I just have a quick look, we have all the fingers, we have the neck, we have the head, we have the jaw. We're gonna build some mechanics. Oh, it seems like okay. I think I actually deleted my main. I deleted my main controller. That's okay though. Let's quickly just try and make a hierarchy here before we finish off. So first of all, I'm just gonna take this whole global controller. There's a lot of stuff going on underneath here, but I'm just gonna duplicate the whole thing and just recreate that main controller, just so we get that in there too. We don't want to forget about that. And then I'm just going to delete everything underneath. So this is just my new main controller. So I promised that I would make lectures enough that will keep you occupied for about a day and a half. And I think like if I spend like 2 hours roughly doing rigging lectures, that should fill up like a day and a half for most of you guys. So yeah, I'm expecting you to watch these over and over a lot of the time. So just because I'm doing it in 2 hours, it should take probably about 4 or 5 times that. That's okay. That's totally expected. So you'll be able to do it just as fast with a little bit of practice. So hang in there. Cool. Yeah, just indicating the front of the character, and let's just have a look at these things. So these clavicle orients could go underneath this controller here. So now that I move this around, the clavicles are following. I don't want the arms to follow because they're IKs. I don't want them when this one is going around. I want the arms to stay still because we want the animators to move that. When I move this around, I want that to move. So if I move these, that's correct. When I move this one around, I also want my arms and legs to follow. So I can just take these legs and hand controllers and just drop them underneath this main controller. And I'm going to take these left and thumb and index finger and drop them underneath the hand controller. Take the R and left index and drop that underneath here. So now the fingers are following the hand. So lastly, let's see what we got left. We have a global controller and we have a main controller. So I'm just going to drop this main controller underneath the global and just have a look like what happens when I move this around. Okay, so it's only the arms and legs. So that's just because we need this spine. It was parent underneath the global. It needs to be parent underneath the main. So now we have global, main, and the main is basically controlling the entire rig. But then after that, the parts are separated, so the arms and legs are on their own, and that'll make sense as soon as we go into the mechanical, which is coming up now. So I'm just gonna save, and then I'm gonna see you guys in the next lecture.